Welcome back to LexTalk, everyone. We're diving into something today that I
Oh,
think
yeah.
is super relevant to all of us here, especially, anyone listening who's involved in English language learning, especially here in Thailand.
Yeah.
Today, we're looking at how memory actually works.
Okay.
And I've got a feeling this deep dive is going to change how some of us approach learning English,
Interesting.
maybe even teaching it.
It's funny. People often think of forgetting as like a failure,
Right.
But understanding the science behind it can totally
Sure.
change your perspective.
So let's unpack this a little bit.
Okay.
What is memory when we're talking about language? Because it feels different than just remembering, like, where I put my keys or something.
That's a great point. It's not just this one big jumbled store of space in your brain.
Right.
Memory, at least in the context of language, is a process.
Okay.
It's a three-step process.
Okay.
First, there's encoding.
Okay.
So imagine hearing a new English word for the first time.
Okay, yeah.
Your brain is taking in that raw sound, right? That's encoding. It's forming like the initial impression.
Okay, so that's that first encounter.
Right.
Then what? Does it just sit there and wait?
Not quite. That
Okay.
initial impression is super fragile.
Oh, okay.
The next step is storage, where your brain tries to hold on to that information.
Okay.
And then finally, there's retrieval.
Gotcha.
And that's that moment when you need that word and you actually remember.
Yeah, and I feel like that retrieval step, that's where things can get a little tricky.
Totally.
Right? We've all get there.
Oh, yeah.
You learn a word, you feel confident about it, and then
Poof. Gone.
it's gone.
The next day.
Yeah, what's happening then?
That's a retrieval problem.
Okay.
Our brains, they're not built for perfect storage.
Right.
If we held on to every single piece of information we ever encountered,
Oh, yeah.
our brains would just be completely overloaded.
Wow, that's true. I never thought about it like that.
There was this study by Ebbinghaus
Okay.
back in the 1880s
Oh,
that
okay.
showed we forget most new information rapidly
Really?
unless we actually actively work to retain it.
So that's a conscious effort.
It's a conscious effort, and it's called the forgetting curve.
Forgetting curve.
It's totally normal.
Okay.
It's not a sign that you're bad at learning.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone does it.
That makes me feel a bit better, honestly.
Right.
So forgetting is natural.
Mm-hmm.
But then the question is, how do we work with our brains
Yeah.
to improve how we remember, especially when it comes to language?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, first we need to understand the different types of memory that are involved.
Okay, so break it down for us.
All right, so one is short-term memory
Okay.
or working memory.
Okay.
It's like our brain's scratch pad.
Gotcha.
It holds information that we're actively using,
Okay.
but it has a very limited capacity.
Okay. And that explains why I struggle to remember.
Like a really long list of new vocabulary if I don't write it down.
Right.
Or if I don't like repeat it immediately.
You're trying to cram too much into that limited working memory space.
Okay.
That's why writing things down or repeating them
Mhm.
helps to transfer that information to long-term memory,
Gotcha.
which is where real learning takes root.
So long-term memory is where we store all those essential building blocks.
Exactly.
Vocab, grammar rules, pronunciation, all of that.
All of it.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part.
Okay, I'm listening.
Even long-term memory isn't just one single entity.
Okay.
There's declarative memory, first of all.
Okay.
Those are the facts and rules you can consciously recall,
Okay.
like grammar explanations.
Right.
And then there's procedural memory,
Procedural memory.
which is about doing things automatically,
Okay.
like speaking fluently without thinking about every single grammar rule.
So it becomes natural.
It becomes natural. Think about riding a bike. Okay.
You don't consciously think about balancing or pedaling anymore.
Right.
You just do it.
Yeah, you just do it.
Right.
So native English speakers are using procedural memory all the time.
Exactly.
Okay, wow.
They've internalized the patterns so deeply
Yeah.
that they don't even have to think about it.
Wow.
And that's the goal for any language learner, to move beyond that conscious effort
Okay.
to that automatic fluent use.
Right. Yeah.
But it takes consistent practice and exposures.
Okay. So that ties back to what we were talking about before.
It all comes full circle, right?
Yeah. With the forgetting curve.
The forgetting curve and the need for active engagement.
I'm already rethinking my study habits just from this conversation.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit.
Good.
But before we move on to specific strategies,
Yeah.
what about that very first encounter with new information?
Okay.
We talked about encoding earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that fit in?
That's sensory memory,
Okay.
which is fascinating because it's so fleeting.
What do you mean?
It's that initial spark when you see a new word
Right.
or you hear it spoken as like a quick snapshot.
Okay.
But unless you do something with that information,
Yeah.
it fades almost instantly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like gone,
So sensory memory is like that ha-ha moment.
that first impression.
Yeah. But it's up to us to move that into more permanent storage.
You got it.
And this is where things like repetition come in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not just any repetition, but spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition. Okay.
This is where you review material at increasing intervals.
Oh.
You're fighting against that natural forgetting curve.
So instead of cramming everything in at once,
Right.
I'm better off spreading it out over time.
Think of it like reminding your brain,
Yeah.
hey, remember this. This is important.
Right.
Studies have shown that spaced repetition leads to much better retention.
Really? Then just cram.
And just cramming, yeah.
Yeah. That's a game changer.
Right.
That explains why I feel like I'm hitting a wall sometimes with vocabulary,
Yeah.
because I'm trying to force too much in all at once.
Too much at once.
Okay, so we talked about spaced repetition. What are some other strategies we can use?
Well, I know you mentioned mnemonics earlier.
Yeah. What are those exactly? And how do they help?
Mnemonics are basically memory tricks
Okay.
that help you create vivid associations with new information.
Okay.
So let's say you're trying to remember the word ubiquitous,
Okay.
which means everywhere.
Ubiquitous. Okay.
You could imagine a cute little ubi character popping up everywhere you go.
I love that.
Right?
It's about making it fun, memorable.
It's got to be fun.
Yeah.
You got to enjoy it.
Are there other ways to make those connections stronger?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very visual learner, so flashcards, colorful notes always help me.
That's tag into multisensory learning,
Okay.
which is super powerful.
Okay.
Engage in multiple senses, sight, sound, even movement.
Mm-hmm.
Creates multiple pathways for your brain to retrieve information later.
So if I'm learning, like, the phrase,
Yeah.
make an appointment,
Okay.
maybe I could, like, write it down, say it out loud,
Yes.
and even mine, like, the action of making an appointment on my phone.
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
giving your brain that multisensory experience.
Okay.
Makes it much more likely to stick.
Gotcha.
And that example actually brings up another strategy.
Okay.
Chunking.
Okay.
Instead of memorizing individual words,
Right.
you're learning a phrase,
Okay.
a chunk of language that's more meaningful, easier to remember.
Oh, so chunking is kind of like how native speakers actually use language.
Exactly.
Right.
They're not thinking about every individual word.
Right.
They're thinking in phrases and chunks.
Gotcha.
By learning in chunks, you're training your brain to process language more naturally.
And that ties back into working memory, right?
It all connects. It
Yeah.
gives your brain manageable pieces to work with,
Okay.
rather than overwhelming it with tons of isolated words.
This is all starting to click for me.
Good.
So we've got spaced repetition, mnemonics, chunking, multisensory learning.
Mm-hmm.
What other tools do we have in our memory boosting toolkit?
Well, one that's super effective, but it takes a bit more effort.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Active recall.
Active recall, tell me more.
It's about forcing yourself to retrieve information before looking at the answer.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just passively rereading your notes.
Right.
Cover them up, try to remember what's there.
So you're really giving your brain a workout.
You're making it work.
Yeah, I could see how that would be more challenging, but probably more beneficial in the long run.
It's that struggle that strengthens the pathways.
Gotcha.
Right.
Any tips for making active recall part of my study routine?
One simple technique is flashcards.
Okay.
Question on one side,
Yeah.
answer on the other.
Mm-hmm.
Really challenge yourself to recall that answer before you flip the card over.
Don't peek.
Don't peek. It's tough at first. But have difficulty. That's what makes it work.
No pain, no gain, but for our brains.
Exactly.
Okay, so active recall, flashcards, I'm going to try that.
Good.
What about actually using the language?
Oh, that's huge.
Does that help with memory as well?
Speaking, writing, even teaching.
Wow, okay.
Those are powerful ways to solidify learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have to explain a concept,
Right.
actually use the language actively,
Yeah.
you force your brain to retrieve that information from long-term memory.
So it's like the ultimate test.
It's the ultimate test.
If you can explain it clearly, you know you've got it.
You've got it.
This doesn't have to be like formal teaching, right?
No, no, no.
Just chatting with friends,
Chatting with friends, online discussion,
participating.
anything.
Yeah.
Any opportunity to use the language
Yeah,
actively
right.
will benefit your memory and your fluency.
Awesome. This is so empowering. It feels like we're really starting to get a handle on how memory works.
It's like cracking the code a little bit.
Yeah. And how to make it work for us, you know, on our language learning journey.
Exactly.
Love that.
It's a powerful feeling, right?
It is, yeah. And speaking of language learning, you know, we have a lot of educators and parents in our audience.
Absolutely.
Any advice specifically for them based on what we're talking about today?
I think one of the most important things is to create a positive and supportive learning environment.
Yeah, make it fun.
Make it fun. Remember, stress and anxiety can actually hinder memory.
That's true.
If learners feel safe and supported,
Yeah.
their brains are much more receptive to new information.
So it's not just about the techniques. It's about fostering that love of learning, a sense of confidence.
It's the whole package.
Yeah.
It really is.
This has been so insightful.
Glad to hear it.
We've covered so much ground already,
Yeah.
but I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, there's always more to explore.
Always more to learn. I love that.
That's the beauty of it, right?
It is.
And building on that idea of a supportive learning environment,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that everyone learns a little differently.
Oh, yeah, for
There's
sure.
no one-size-fits-all approach.
That's so true.
Right.
I remember struggling in school
Yeah.
because I just wasn't a strong auditory learner.
Okay.
Traditional lectures,
Mm-mm.
they just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I hear you.
I needed to see things, to take notes, draw diagrams.
Together.
That's how I made sense of the information.
And that's a great example
Yeah.
of how understanding your own learning style can be a game changer.
Right.
Some people learn best through listening,
Right.
others through hands-on activities, others through visual aids.
Okay.
The key is to experiment and find what clicks for you.
So it's not about forcing yourself to fit into some mold.
Right.
It's about embracing your own unique strengths.
Exactly.
I love that.
Takes the pressure off.
It does. It really does. And speaking of pressure,
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges for language learners, especially here in Thailand,
Yeah.
is just that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Oh, for sure.
There's so much to learn.
So much.
It feels like you're constantly playing catch up.
It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes.
Yes.
And that feeling of overwhelm, it can actually work against us.
How so?
Because stress and anxiety, they actually hinder memory.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So it's not just about finding the right techniques.
No.
It's also about managing our emotional state.
Exactly. Creating a positive, relaxed learning environment. That's crucial.
Yeah.
Think about it. We all have memories that are tied to strong emotions.
Yeah.
Happy childhood event, a scary experience.
Right.
Those memories, they tend to stick with us.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of that emotional connection.
Yeah.
The same applies to language learning.
Okay.
If you can connect positive emotions to your learning experiences,
Yeah.
you're much more likely to remember.
So finding ways to make language learning fun, enjoyable.
Yes.
That's like a brain hack.
It's a brain hack. It's about making those neural connections stronger.
I love that.
Right.
So whether it's watching a funny English movie or listening to catchy English songs
Yeah.
or even chatting with friends in English
Right.
about things you're passionate about.
Find what brings you joy.
Yes.
Incorporate it.
Okay.
Make it fun.
Love it.
Right.
This brings us to another challenge that's specific to English learners here in Thailand. Interference.
Ah, yes.
What is that exactly?
Interference is that phenomenon where the different languages that we know can kind of get jumbled up in our brains.
I've definitely experienced that. Right.
Thai and English, they have very distinct structures, sound systems, so it's natural for those languages to sometimes interfere with each other.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time.
Really?
I find myself accidentally using Thai grammar
Oh, yeah.
when I'm trying to speak English. Or I'll mix up words that sound similar in both languages.
Right, yeah.
It's so frustrating.
It's a common experience
Okay.
for bilinguals and multilinguals.
Good. So it's not just me.
You're not alone.
Okay, good. But are there ways to manage that interference?
Absolutely.
Okay.
One effective strategy is to create clear boundaries
Okay.
between your English learning and your Thai language use.
So designating certain times of day for English study
Exactly.
and not mixing the two.
Creating that mental English zone.
Okay, an English zone.
Where you can fully immerse yourself.
Gotcha.
Can really help to minimize that interference.
So it doesn't have to be this huge chunk of time.
No, not at all.
Just consistent, focused.
Consistent is key.
Okay.
Even just 30 minutes a day can make a difference.
That's encouraging. And speaking of resources, are there any that might be particularly helpful
Oh, absolutely.
for English learners here in Thailand?
The great thing is there are tons of resources specifically designed for Thai learners of English.
Wow, okay.
You can find textbooks, workbooks that address those common challenges, online courses that cater to different learning styles.
Right.
Even English language media that's relevant to Thai culture and interests.
So it's about finding the resources
Yes.
that resonate with
That you connect with.
make you feel motivated.
Exactly.
Okay, so I know, for example, I love watching English movies
Yeah.
with Thai subtitles.
Great example.
Helps me pick up new words, get a feel for natural pronunciation.
And don't underestimate the power of those real-world experiences.
Okay.
Talking to English-speaking friends,
Yeah.
visiting English-speaking countries, even just listening to English music or podcasts.
Right, yeah.
It all makes a difference.
It's about finding those opportunities to immerse yourself,
Immersion is key.
even if it's just for a little bit each day.
A little bit goes a long way.
Okay, and speaking of motivation,
Ah, yes.
I think that's often the biggest hurdle
It can be.
for language learners,
No
no matter where they are.
matter where they are.
How do we stay motivated,
That's the question, isn't it?
especially when we're juggling work, family?
Life gets in the way.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Motivation is the fuel.
Mm-hmm.
that keeps us going.
Right.
But it can be fickle,
Yeah, it can
hard to maintain
over
for the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why it's so important to understand
Okay.
the different types of motivation,
Okay.
how we can tap into them.
Okay, so break it down for us.
All right.
What are the key types of motivation when it comes to language learning?
One important distinction is
Okay.
between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Okay, I've heard those terms before. Can you
Yeah.
remind me what they mean?
Of course.
Especially in the context of language learning.
So intrinsic motivation
Okay.
comes from within.
Okay.
It's that drive to do something.
Yeah.
Because you find personally rewarding.
Okay.
Enjoyable.
So you're doing it for yourself,
You're doing it for yourself.
not for some external.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
So in language learning,
Yeah.
it might be the sheer joy of discovering a new language,
Oh, okay.
the satisfaction of connecting with people from different cultures,
Right?
or maybe even just the intellectual stimulation of
Mhm.
understanding how language works.
So it's that love of learning itself.
It is.
Not about external rewards or pressures.
Exactly, and that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's sustainable. It keeps you coming back for more.
Even when it's tough.
Even when it's tough. But don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Extrinsic motivation can be a powerful driver too.
Okay, so what's that?
Extrinsic motivation
Mm-hmm.
comes from external factors
Okay.
like rewards, recognition, or the desire to avoid negative consequences.
Okay, so that's like pressure from outside.
A little bit, yeah.
Mm.
So in language learning,
Yeah.
it might be the need to pass an English exam,
Okay.
the desire to get a promotion,
Uh-huh.
or maybe even pressure from family or society to speak English fluently.
Right, so you need to do it for work or something.
Right.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
it's like having that external push, but
Mhm.
also that internal spark.
Right, ideally we want both.
Ideally, you want a balance of both.
Okay, so how do we do that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, how do we cultivate both?
Right. So when it comes to intrinsic motivation,
Okay.
it's about finding what sparks your joy and curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
What aspects of the English language do you find fascinating?
So really connecting with it on a personal level.
Yeah.
Okay, so like if I love cooking,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I could start following English language food blogs
Great example.
or watching cooking shows.
Exactly. You can make it personally meaningful.
Okay,
You're much more likely to stay motivated.
I like that.
Don't be afraid to get creative.
Yeah, make it your own.
Make it your own.
Okay, so what about extrinsic motivation then?
So for extrinsic motivation,
How do we kind of harness that in a healthy way?
one key is to set realistic and achievable goals.
Okay,
Instead of aiming for fluency overnight,
right, yeah.
break down your learning into smaller steps.
Okay, small steps.
Celebrate those small wins.
Okay, so like mastering a new grammar rule.
Yes,
Or being able to hold like a basic conversation.
exactly. Those small victories,
Yeah.
they provide a boost of extrinsic motivation.
Gotcha.
Keep you moving forward.
Okay, I like that.
And don't underestimate the power of rewards.
Ooh, rewards.
Right. Whether it's a small treat,
Mm-hmm.
a relaxing activity, something you've been looking forward to.
Yeah,
Those rewards can help reinforce those positive learning habits.
it's like giving yourself a pat on the back,
Exactly.
for the effort.
For all that hard work.
Yeah, and I think that's so important
Mm-hmm.
because language learning, it could feel like a marathon,
It is a marathon.
not a sprint.
It's a journey, not a destination.
I love that.
Right? And speaking of journeys,
Mm.
I think one of the most powerful motivators is having a supportive community,
Oh, to
fellow
sell.
learners.
It's so much easier
It is.
to stay motivated
Mm-hmm.
when you have people to share your struggles with.
Yes,
Celebrate your successes.
absolutely.
Practice is key. It's like having a team of cheerleaders
Yeah, it is.
who understand what you're going through.
Exactly. Humans are social creatures. We
Mhm.
thrive in environments where we feel connective,
Okay, that makes sense.
supported.
So finding a language exchange partner, maybe.
Yeah.
Joining a study group.
Mm-hmm.
Or connecting with other English learners online.
All great options.
Wow, this has been such a fascinating conversation.
Glad you're enjoying it.
I feel like we're finally starting to get a grip on this whole memory thing.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And how to make it work for us,
Absolutely.
in our language learning.
It's all about finding what works for you.
I love that emphasis on individuality.
It's so important.
Yeah, there's no one right way.
No one right way.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into
Mhm.
memory and language learning,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways?
Okay, first and foremost,
Yeah.
I want to emphasize that memory is not fixed.
Okay.
It's a skill that we can develop and improve.
So if you've struggled with language retention in the past,
Don't give up.
Okay.
There are things you can do.
So it's not about being inherently good or bad at languages.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding how your brain learns best.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why we talked about all these different types of memory,
Mm-hmm.
the forgetting curve,
Right.
the importance of active engagement
It's about working with your brain,
with your brain.
not against it.
Exactly.
And then we have all those fantastic memory-boosting strategies.
So many tools.
They've got spaced repetition, mnemonics, chunking,
Mhm.
active recall, multisensory learning, speaking, teaching.
The list goes on.
It does. The key is to experiment.
Experiment.
Find what works for you.
Exactly. It's like building your own personalized language learning toolkit.
I love that analogy.
The more you practice, the more skilled you become.
Yeah, and I think the other key takeaway, maybe the most important,
Mm-hmm.
is that importance of creating that positive,
Yes.
supportive learning environment.
It makes all the difference.
Minimize stress, embrace your unique learning style,
Mm-hmm.
find joy in the process, connect with other learners.
It's the whole package.
It is.
Right.
It's not just about the mechanics. It's about cultivating that mindset
That's it.
of curiosity, enthusiasm,
And resilience.
resilience. Okay, I love that.
Right. That's something we can all work on, no
Mhm.
matter our level,
Yeah,
no matter our goals.
beautifully said. I think it's time to open up the conversation
Yeah, let's hear from our listeners.
to our listeners. So what memory strategies have you guys found helpful in your own um, language learning journeys?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Especially if you're an educator or a parent
Yeah, what techniques have you used
that really seem to click
that really work?
with your students, your children.
Share your tips, your experiences in the comments below.
We'd love to make this a space where
Yeah,
we can all learn from each other.
because at the end of the day,
Yeah,
we're all in this together.
that's a perfect way to put it. It's not about competition.
No.
It's about collaboration, support,
And remember, every small step forward is a victory.
right?
Don't get discouraged by those roadblocks.
Yeah, those challenges are just opportunities for growth
Exactly.
and learning, and who knows, maybe you'll discover a new memory trick or a technique
Yeah.
that you can share with the community.
Speaking of new discoveries,
Okay,
be sure to tune in next time
Yes.
for another episode of LexTalk.
we'll be diving into the world.
Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Ooh, exciting.
What drives us to learn
Yeah,
and how we can harness that for lasting success.
can't wait to unpack that one.
It's gonna be good.
So to all our amazing listeners out there, don't forget to follow LexTalk,
On all their platforms.
a website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn,
SoundCloud.
SoundCloud, Spotify. We're LexTalk Podcast everywhere.
And as always,
Let's talk LexTalk.